Welcome to another episode of Big Beacon Innovators and Innovations. And I'm Dave Goldberg, President and founder of Big Beacon, a movement to transform engineering education. I'm based in Douglas, Michigan, on a cold and snow-covered day. And today I have with me Alan Snyder at Lehigh University. And hi, Alan.
Hi, Dave. I'm glad to be here, and welcome to snow-covered and chilly Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
So we got snow, and we hope there are people watching this in warmer climates. Alan has a very interesting background. He's currently Vice President and Associate Provost for Research and Graduate Studies at Lehigh University. He's a bioengineer by training, and prior to coming to Lehigh, spent a varied 27-year career in academic medicine, including his work on the research and design and development of devices for patients with intractable heart failure. He's taught subjects as varied as bioengineering, medical ethics and professionalism, clinical research ethics, and held leadership positions in tech transfer and research administration. At Lehigh, the university's identity as a student-centered research university, his interest in the value of research environment to students at all levels, and his interest in commonalities among scholarly pursuits in different fields of study has led him to the work on the Mountaintop initiative, which is the main subject of our discussion today. Alan, I'm anxious to get into talking about Mountaintop and other exciting things going on at Lehigh. But before we dive in, what should our audience members know about you personally and professionally that they might not know?
Well, Dave, maybe it's the hardest question you'll ask me. I think of myself as a lucky person. As you read my bio, when I was at Penn State at the College of Medicine, I was an engineer immersed in academic medicine, just a little bit out of my element, which was probably the best thing about it. Always having avenues to elicit curiosity when you're surrounded by people not exactly like you. And in my transition to Lehigh University from an academic medical center to a comprehensive campus, and stepping into a job where it's my responsibility to attempt to appreciate the work of all kinds of people. Again, I'm not exactly surrounded by my own element, and that's, to me, the best thing about the job.
Though that's kind of interesting. The idea that not being comfortable is a way to growth. What is there one thing personally that some outside interest that you have that might be of interest to our viewers?
Oh gosh, I like to build things. Maybe that's the engineer who's no longer practicing, and so I'm a fiddler and a tinkerer. I'm a good pizza maker. Take it very, very seriously, and have built implements to do the same. I like to cook. I like to make bread. I like to read in varied and interrupted fashion, usually 5 unfinished things at a given time.
Awesome, and next time I come to Bethlehem, maybe I can take you up on some of that cooking and pizza demonstration.
Absolutely.
Hey, so we met back in fall of 2012, and I remember, I believe at the time, the Mountaintop was either just starting or just in the planning or almost launching stages. What is, so for our viewers, what is Mountaintop, and how did it come about?
Sure. Yeah, we met in the fall of 2012. It was October or November, and we were just anticipating our first experiment and starting to understand what that was going to look like. The work really started about a year before that. It was the latter half, late summer, early fall of 2011. And we were thinking about the value of the residential environment. Not so much residential in terms of students living on campus, which of course is important. We're thinking more in terms of the campus community as a varied community of scholars and seekers who are in residence together. And I, in my role as a VP for research, I was particularly interested in integration of research and education. And out of a number of conversations came the recognition that it's never too early to posit students as active and independent seekers. You could say, in contrast with the all too common mental model people have of undergraduate students as mainly consumers of knowledge that's already cataloged and codified and in the books. So the first clear conception of what later came to be called the Mountaintop experience involved this notion of a group of students, preferably interdisciplinary, and that's something that's important to us at Lehigh, varied majors or intended majors, for example, having in common their interest in a question or a problem or a possibility. And we thought, after having lived and studied for 18 years or so, there's a lot that they would know, and like the rest of us, there'd be even more that they don't know. And with faculty guidance, they could start with a big open question, a problem, or even an attempt to figure out what the problem really is in some domain, or a possibility they wanted to test, and simply see where that would take them. The idea was that the students' group endeavors would grow more sophisticated over time. They might provide context and motivations for their more traditional coursework that they still need. And one of the things we recognized is that there's a clear analogy here to the process of research, which is something the faculty live every day, in which the most precious thing is often a good question. The most important skill is probably the ability to recognize a good question. And in which,
so I'm hearing this in a couple of interesting ways. So I'm hearing this, the idea of sort of the residential campus as a resource, not thinking about modifications to it, but thinking of, so a lot of people are talking about educational reform in terms of technology. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hearing you talk about, no, we've got a campus, and one of our competitive advantages against other things in the future is the fact that we're residential and that we're present to each other. So I'm hearing that part. I'm hearing this part about seeking, and then I'm hearing, and then some people might think it's strange that I'm talking to a VP of research and grad studies about essentially undergraduate experiences, but I'm hearing the analog to research as sort of motivation for sort of that seeking isn't just something that professors do. Seeking is what this whole community does. I'm hearing those three things in your narrative.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's no anti-technology if there are learning technologies that can serve students well. Of course, we'd want to adopt them. We're also going to be appropriately critical and demanding in terms of what students get from those technologies. But you're right, part of the recognition is two things you mentioned. One is what can be most valuable about this place where all of these people are together in what is a rather wonderful mix. And that flip, I call it, where the student's perceived role or lived role changes from consumer of what's written out or scheduled for her to an active seeker, just like everybody else.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that as a bigger flip than what we usually talk about, flipping the classroom. But I'm hearing that is a bigger flip of expectations. It's not just switching some of the stuff that we do in the classroom to to time at home for homework, we're talking about a flip in roles, or a certain kind of role reversal is what I'm hearing in that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it's 2012. You're kind of moving into the first experiments. You're having this conversation. I guess, why now? What spurred the conversation at this point in history? I mean, we've been pretty stable doing the same old thing. We've been going out and getting research money. We've been abusing our students in lectures for a long time. Why change now? What prompted the discussion at Lehigh at this point in history?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things coming together. One was simply being in a phase where we're thinking about our directions as a university. As we all know, coming out of the financial catastrophe of 2008, there was a lot of questioning of the value proposition, what universities are doing for society. There was a lot of noise about massive online education as a substitute for higher education, rather than as the hyper textbook kind of format that it probably is. One episode at the time was that it was I think in 2010 that the VC Peter Thiel, in the interest of demonstrating to everyone of the unnecessary nature of higher education, that he would pay some college students to drop out of school and instead immerse them in his entrepreneurial network. And we thought, well, gosh, entrepreneurial experiences, or more broadly, any experience in which the student is the seeker and the doer, and has a self-directed, self-guided experience, or more properly ought to occur under the guidance and mentorship of experts like our faculty, who, as I said, conduct their lives every day as independent inquirers, and that yes, students should be taking risks. They might have their first few failures, whether they're in their chosen intellectual directions, or if they're ones who want to create businesses in those ventures. They should have their first failure too when they're still in a explicit learning environment. And this is something that we could combine with everything else that we do to serve their needs on a college campus. So those perceived threats were certainly part of it.
It's interesting. If I can jump in, it's interesting. The Thiel example is one that gets talked about a lot in academic circles, and of course, he's still giving $100,000 scholarships to people to not go to school, and so he's still provoking conversation in universities. And the last quote I saw from him has said something about universities being like the Catholic Church, and that the university education today was like the buying of indulgences back in the day. And so his critique hasn't cut back. But it's interesting that you saw the threat in the sense of experience, and then you also used the word expert. And I think one of the things that we're shifting from is the sense of the expert knowing and telling, to some other kind of role for the faculty member in facilitating these experiences. And that's a pretty big shift in terms of the kind of thing that the faculty member, the kind of role that the faculty member is supposed to play.
I think at least in terms of how people think about the role that the faculty member is supposed to play. I've told people faculty members are addicted to seeing the lights go on in a pair of eyes, and will tend to do anything to see it again once they experience it. And they are extraordinarily good at guiding the thinking of young people. And as you know, to watch a group of students working and to witness a faculty member just dropping an oh so innocent sounding question into the mix as he walks by is to watch an expert in action, because the question is dropped into the mix to cause students to encounter things that they otherwise might have missed. And without telling the students anything, you cause the discovery to happen. And this is what our faculty are good at. That is not at all a routine skill set. It's a rarefied and very nuanced skill.
Yes, and so, all right. So it's 2012. You go into your first summer's experience, and we've talked since, and some pretty cool things have happened. What have been some of the things that you've learned, or the outstanding experiences that you've had since kicking this off?
I think, yeah, the most exciting thing to watch has been the unleashing of creativity. And the most interesting things, and I think the things we're certainly not finished with, are understanding the predisposing conditions. After 2013,
yeah, what do you mean by what do you mean by the predisposing conditions?
So at the end of the summer of 2013, in reflecting on the experience, one of our faculty members said, in essence, we talk about intellectual and creative freedom for students all the time, and that in practice, it's hard to adhere to that.
Yes.
Often because we do get very concerned about things they need to know, and tend to be driven by that. And what he said was the environment gave him the discipline to preserve that intellectual and creative freedom for students, and that in response, students rose to the occasion, and in his words, became accountable to the work and to each other, rather than to him. And so in some sense, there's this phenomenon whereby when the faculty member was no longer telling the students what to do, or even what their goals should be, there was nothing left to be accountable to than the work and to each other. And then they do remarkable things beyond the expectations of people who went into it with a very, very positive and sunny view of their students.
Yeah. So can you give us? Are there some for instances that can give our viewers a sense of the kinds of things that happened when the students were unleashed?
Sure. So that faculty member was a member of our English department, and his students' project was to make a documentary film about the first 4 women on our faculty, who were all hired in the 1970s, early 1970s, at an all-male school, amidst threats that all universities were facing of losing access to federal grant and loan funds for students if they didn't bring women onto the faculty. What the students were given were the prearrangement that the 4 women were willing and interested in speaking with the students. 1 or 2 of them had some documentary film experience, and beyond that, they got cameras and plane tickets and access to an editing setup. And so the students had, on their own accord, gone from research back to the sources as best as you can define it, to making sense of all they heard, to assembling a coherent narrative based on what they learned, and presenting it, in this case, in documentary film form to an audience. And what they presented was this wonderful, appropriately funny, keenly observed, multi-threaded narrative about the people, about the university, about very interesting times in American history. And they'd gone through an entire research process: observation, sense-making, communication of understanding on their own.
Nice. Yeah, and it's surprising that it's surprising given the norms that exist, that they're able to do that, and whenever it's witnessed, it causes us pause to the extent to which we've underestimated them. But I was thinking back to the term that the faculty member said it gave the discipline to stand by the position of trusting the students, or giving them their heads and supporting them in this way. And it seems to me that part of that is the change in norms that come about in a different microculture like what you've created in the Mountaintop. That somehow in this other place there are different expectations, and those different expectations then have an easier time working, or something like that. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's probably true. I think one thing we need to acknowledge is that things of this sort go on in lots and lots of classrooms.
Sure.
And we have lots of faculty who want, of all things, want their students to become good and clear and independent thinkers. I don't know about you, but I had a mentor once who told me the next time he wanted to hear from me was when I rejected one of his papers for publication. Teachers want their students to surpass them and to be independent. So in some ways, it's the way this kind of ethic pervades the environment, and in the observation of this particular member of the faculty, the kind of purity with which he was able to hold to that because he had no content agenda with the students.
Yeah. So, and we're about 6-7 minutes to the end of the program, and so what's been the reaction on campus, faculty, students, administration? How's this been received, both positively and negatively?
So positively, I think of one of our faculty members who's been involved, and we had a panel discussion, maybe about 9 months ago, with mostly junior members of the faculty, and this professor was on the panel, and one of my initial questions was about describing a peak experience with students. And she said, frankly, Mountaintop. And she said that what was important about it was that she wasn't teaching them, she was immersed in the material with them. Mm. And that she would walk in and suddenly realize that 4 hours had gone by, and it felt like an hour. And of course, this is someone who, of all things, most wants to infect her students with this sense of discovery. Nice. And learn from them. It happened to be a sociology professor working with a political science partner, some of whose mentees were engineers, and so the recognition that the faculty member doesn't necessarily need to be expert in the student's chosen domain, because their team was about a problem that was going to require all sorts of expertise. On the negative side, I think one of the things that's been most difficult and has taken the longest amount of time was, and in part it's the external environment. It's easy for people to get the idea that the initiative is entirely about tech and entirely about entrepreneurship, when really we found that something most wonderful about it is the variety, the value in the variety, and the sense of universality of the discovery process. So that's taken time for people to come around to. And it's been important, as I said earlier, to be sure we honor things that people do in their classrooms, because people do some wonderful things.
Yes. Well, and I'm hearing, so I'm hearing this idea that there's a bias towards tech, but I think, it's interesting when you bring technology and engineering faculty together with liberal arts faculty. They bring they sort of complementary biases to the table that both need eradicating. So the engineering faculty members come to the table with this idea that there is a fixed body of knowledge that you need to master, and there's one right answer to many questions. And so they get a lot from working with liberal arts faculty who are used to the rough and tumble of the seminar room and multiple perspectives. But the bias on the other side is this idea that it's okay to act in the world and do something in the world rather than just think about stuff. And there's this disdain almost for acting in the world, and having a project is sort of anathema to the liberal arts sensibility. And so seems to me that there's part of that bias or expression of that this is technology comes from the idea that there are projects and that the students do something in the world.
Yeah, well, I think, and maybe you've led me to something high, and that is a very particular lack of fear and eagerness to enter into the world around us. And so one of the things that pervades the university, including engineers, including the artists, including the natural scientists, including the social scientists, the humanists, is a kind of eagerness to work in the world and have your work informed by the world. So we don't see we don't have a lot of armchair scholars in the liberal arts here, and maybe that's why we were able to do something like this so readily.
That's interesting, and of course that has something to do with the history of the institution and where it came from. What's up next? What's up next? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the fact that we're embedded in a particular community that, in a sense, is emblematic of certain aspects of American history, and university has a strong commitment to that community. The big next thing for us is movement from these experiments that have gone wonderfully into something we do routinely throughout the academic year and as an integral part of our students' education. Of course, this includes credit. There are lots of things about residential education that are part of education, whether there are credits attached to them or not. But this is something that we anticipate will have credit attached to it.
Yes. And we're coming to a close of our time together. What if you were to leave our viewers with one thing? What one thing would you tell them about the program that you think they'd like to know?
thing I'd want people to remember is trust your students. Something, Dave, that you pointed out to me, the importance of the word trust. I suspect that they have a very keen sense of whether they're really being trusted with their work, and they respond accordingly. And trust your faculty. We started with some initial ideas. We had some very interesting space that we didn't get to talk about it. And what has worked here has been to share the ideas and see what faculty and students do with them.
And where can people find out more about Mountaintop?
Lehigh.edu/mountaintop. We'll get you to the homepage for the initiative, and soon you'll see the listings of projects for this coming summer. There's some links to things that have been in the media and so forth.
Great. Well, Alan, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us about Mountaintop. It's a very exciting initiative. I think a lot of people ought to come see what you're doing. I just think it has a lot of the elements of what make a modern 21st century change initiative. And we're excited for you and wish you all the best as you go forward.
Great. And thank you, Dave. And yes, we'd love to have people come and visit.
And so thank you, Alan Snyder. And next month we'll have Jennifer Herrick from the University of Twente, who will talk to us about their exciting Atlas program in the Netherlands. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Innovators and Innovations, and we'll see you next month.